Good afternoon, everyone. The September 24th, 2024 regular council meeting agenda is called to order at 4:01. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelet on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that the proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Section 10.52 of the Council Procedure Bylaw limits the number of times a member may attend an in-person meeting electronically to 4, and Section 10.6b of that bylaw prohibits council members from attending in-person closed meetings electronically. These sections of the Council Procedure Bylaw can be suspended by resolution of Council. Since Councillor Hoare anticipates that she may not be able to attend council meetings in person for the rest of the year, I move that Council suspend Sections 10.52 and 10.6b of the Council Procedure Bylaw until December 31st, 2024 to allow Councillor Hoare to attend more than 4 in-person council meetings electronically and to allow Councillor Hoare to attend in-person closed council meetings electronically. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Kennington, any further discussion? All in favour? None opposed? That carries. Has Council received the late item, which is a letter from the Clayoquot Biosphere Trust related to the annual exhibit in observation of the National Day of Truth and Reconciliation and CBT's Fall Regional Forum? I think we've all got that. May I have a motion to amend the September 24th, 2024 regular meeting agenda by adding CBT's letter referred to as Clayoquot Biosphere Trust letter dated September 24th, 2024 as agenda item 10.3.
So moved.
Councillor Mafty, do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Kennington, any further discussion? All in favour? None opposed? That carries. May I have a motion to adopt the agenda as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson, do I have a seconder?
Second.
Councillor Mafty, all in favour? None opposed? That carries. There are 2 meeting minutes for adoption this afternoon. The first minutes are from the August 27th, 2024 special council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the August 27th, 2024 special council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
Second.
Councillor Mafty seconds. All in favour? None opposed. That carries. The next minutes are from the September 3rd, 2024 regular council meeting. Are there any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the September 3rd, 2024 regular council meeting minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington,
Second.
Councillor Anderson, all in favour? None opposed. That carries. Our next agenda item is a delegation from Sergeant Jones on local policing issues. Welcome. I think it lifts up.
So, can you hear me okay? Perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you. Sorry, not too great with technologies, obviously. I'll start with summer has come and gone now for us, and extremely busy. Extremely busy for us. You'll notice that through my monthly reports, our monthly file volumes have dramatically increased from previous as compared to last year's months. So, that taken into account, we are on track for a very, very busy year. We're going to surpass our last year's quotas. So what does that mean in general? It means that the members are working. They have more file loads. We're doing more things. So this is stuff. I'll be having a meeting with our district officer again, trying to push on the agenda, hopefully for further provincial resources, full-time, and associated equipment that's going to be needed for that as well. In general, just a quick look. Obviously, September's will be coming out shortly here, so we only got really a peek here at August. Stats, stuff that I like to see, like I said, generally files that concern me are the violent offenses. Assaults and sexual assaults, when you look at them, they're actually down. And by the way the numbers are looking as compared to what they were last year, I would say we're forecasting to be under those numbers. So that's always a good thing. With the sexual offenses and such being down, I must also throw into account here, we now have third-party sexual assault reporting. It came out of the community resource centers and such. So there's some positives coming out of that for help for people that are victims of those type of situations. Things that you can look at, you'll probably notice what is on the increase. Well, obviously our minor thefts or thefts under 5,000, that can be explained on a lot of different avenues. I don't think we have a trend of anything at this point, but we definitely have seen an increase in that. Other things you're going to see an increase are going to be such as causing a disturbance in the liquor acts and liquor seizures. That falls part and parcel because we were getting a number of complaints from the downtown area, right down by the aquarium. There was public drinking, people were upset. I then enacted that the members were going to be doing foot patrols. They had to report it every day. And as such, we ended up creating a lot of files, a lot of liquor dumps, a lot of people that we're dealing with that were drinking in public and intoxicated. I personally think from the information I got back from the general public, they were very happy about it. I think it had a very positive effect. It did result in a couple of arrests, but for the most part didn't really increase anything dramatically. So that was one of the initiatives that we undertook and we were pretty happy with. Another thing you'll notice too is we've taken initiatives as well for speeding. Hopefully you're seeing it. I've been telling the members to get down and they should be in front of the schools in that playground zone. And so I've been keeping tabs on that too. So I'll actually have hard data to let everybody know if they ever inquire about it. How many times are the members down there? What are they doing? Have they created any files? That type of thing. So that way we can keep tabs on that. Another thing you're going to see an increase in, which I actually think is interesting, it's called the IRP 24-hour suspension. What that is, it's a liquor-related type situation where instead of charging somebody with impaired driving, the police officer has the option to enact the different suspensions through the Motor Vehicle Act. You'll see a substantial increase as compared to last year. We've already doubled it and probably continue. I attribute that not only to some of the good work by the members here, some members are really stepped up to it, but we've also brought back that impaired driving unit and they do come in. And as such, we've been seeing a lot more positives out of that. In fact, not just the liquor stuff, we've now had 2 approved charges through federal Crown for trafficking. So we've had drugs that they've caught. And ironically, not necessarily local people. It's people that are coming in. So it's these outsiders that are coming in with large amounts. So that's how it's transpired as well. Some other positives, like I said, victim services, we're way on track for being way above for what we normally would be recommending and getting help for victims. So I'm happy to see that. Prisoners count is actually going down. The one thing I just want to kind of caution when I look at this, right now we've, in that year to date, says we've had 32 prisoners in our cells. If you look at the previous year total, it says 38. The unfortunate thing is you got to look below that, prisoners escorted. That's when we didn't have prison guards available. They had to go to Tofino. That's where we housed them for that time. So in total, it really is 49 prisoners in total we had last year. So we're on track to keeping that number hopefully below that total. And positives came out of it from, we have now got a really great complement of guards and we've had a lot of people show interest. So in fact, we've actually now started helping Tofino out because they've lost their guards, and so now we're the ones that can step up to the plate for that. Try not to take up too much time. Just some quick things just to note. Big one I think everybody should know: body-worn cameras. It's been in the news. Tofino, Ahousaht, and Ucluelet are all on they call them the Wave Zero, the trial ones. We're the first police officers on the island that will be getting it. So the official date hasn't come out, but we are looking for late November, possibly early December. And you'll have more information when it comes out. I'm just giving the heads up. You will see police officers with body-worn cameras. So I think we don't need to go into that, but you know, the accountability that's going to come from that, and I think there's going to be a lot of good having those. And I'm actually happy that we were a part of the first wave. So we've set the detachment up. It's been a lot of, you can imagine there's a lot of stuff we have to do to keep the equipment going and such. So, and we're just into the training phase right now. So that's one great thing I'm looking forward to. As I mentioned before, file increase has gone up. That means charge files have also gone up, and we'll easily surpass our file count for the total of last year. What that'll end up in the end of the year, I'll have a better idea of what type of offenses we're looking at, the type of thing, give you an idea of where the trends are, if there are any. It could just be just the way it is sometimes. And for the most part, I think that's pretty much about it.
That's great. You answered all my questions about the stats and why they were so high in certain categories, and a lot of that seems to come from your foot patrols.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great to know. Any questions for the sergeant? Any questions, Councillor Hoare? No. Okay. Well, thank you very much for the update and for your good work.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take care.
Is there any unfinished business? Seeing none, there are 2 bylaw items. The first item is 7.1, zoning amendment and DVP for Lot 2, Plan E, PP 117265. This report will be presented by the Director of Community Planning. After Mr. Gregg presents, the applicant or their agent will have an opportunity to speak. Welcome, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. I'll just share my screen here, if I may. Oh, it says it's disabled participant screen sharing. Come, okay. There we are. Thank you, through the mayor. This is an application from the cabins at Terrace Beach, the owners. You may be wondering, these guys again? Haven't we had a few applications already over the past few years? And yes, so this piece, it's rezoning and a development variance permit for a proposed subdivision in phase strata. On the one hand, there's some complexity to it. On the other hand, it's fairly simple, and I'll try to explain. So on the left-hand side of the screen, is the plan that was issued with the development permit in 2017. In 2021, this was issued. And essentially, the development at the time that was approved, I'm just going to highlight, there were 13 cabins that were approved along the old alignment of the Peninsula Road right-of-way. And there was, I think they had 9 parcels of land, at least fragments of land, that were going to be consolidated, and that included a couple of things. Sort of their existing cabins was one piece that was split off. The old road and some other fragments were this Lot A, which is sort of an odd shape, or Lot 2. And then there was what was referred to as the Midden parcel, which the owners had agreed to transfer to the ownership of the Ucluelethat government. And so so there are 13 cabins on the road, and you'll notice this little blue area in the bottom, which was land that was the owners had offered to dedicate as road, which would be widening Seabridge Road right-of-way. So that has been done. The trail dedication was done. The subdivision to create 3 parcels instead of all these little bits and pieces of the old road and stuff, that's been completed. And really what this is about is, I should point out 2 other things about the development permit. You'll notice in the lower right corner here, there was a proposed future mixed-use building that would go potentially in that location. That wasn't part of the development really at that point. They just simply cited it for, well, in the future, if we have detailed plans, we'll come in for a development permit for that building was the intent. Likewise, there's a site, a sort of disturbed area up by the pump house, up towards the intersection of the Boardwalk Boulevard, where there was another future mixed-use site there. The balance of that area in the back is wetland, which is protected by a covenant now. And so the owners have built 12 of the 13 cabins since then, and are sort of thought through and have come forward saying, okay, we want to be able to sell pieces of this. And so what they're proposing is to subdivide, essentially allow the exact same construction to occur, but it simply gives them flexibility for ownership and what title there is. Because essentially it would allow these cabins to be separate from the two buildings that were proposed for the future along Peninsula Road. And as I said, they'd built 12 of the 13 cabins to date, and they'd like to keep the option of building a 13th one. So all that sort of precursor. So on the right is the what's shown in the report as stage 1. So they're proposing this would be, to accomplish this, they would do this in 2 stages. One is a simple fee simple subdivision to take this sort of C-shaped odd parcel which wraps around the midden and to split it into 3 pieces. One would be the development site on Peninsula Road with the wetlands still protected in the back, the cabins along, this long sort of piece, and then the third would be the future mixed-use building site on the corner there. Physically, those parcels, it's really drawing boundaries around 3 segments of the same site, but the proposal for the actual development on the ground wouldn't change. And then the second piece of this is if they did that to create those 3 parcels, lot A, B, and C, the second their intention is to register basically a strata, a phased strata over the lot A. So that's the cabins on the old road right-of-way. So essentially the way to keep the option of building the 13th cabin in the future is to do it as a phased strata, where phase 1 would be the 12 buildings that are there today, and phase 2 would be that 13th cabin in the future. So there's a bit of, a lot of survey work and legal work and easements and whatnot that they would need to do this, but it gives them the ability to raise title to those 12 cabins and have the ability to add a 13th into the strata at a future date. So to do all of that, they need to change the zoning to allow the lot size for these pieces, including this second phase of the strata, because a phase strata at the time phase 1 is registered, the remainder is a fee simple parcel. So the legal works here is that we need to make sure that at every point in time that parcel meets the zoning requirement. And so that's why this zoning amendment has this little lot size and some really small setbacks to this cabin here, and including a 0 setback because there's a lot line there that the intention is it's a point in time. They could build the cabin right along that lot line. If they enter it into the strata and it becomes phase 2, that lot line disappears. So that essentially in a nutshell is to allow them to define, create title to what they've built and what they previously had authorization to build. The setbacks, there's variance for number of setbacks. It really allows them to, keep what's there. So no real physical movement or change. And for the other variance is around frontage. That each of these, the lot A would have frontage legally on Seabridge Way, where we have parking currently, and the remainder would also have that legal road frontage, but they would still have physical access over this lot C to use essentially the driveway that's constructed recently and sort of defined, so that they don't have any impact on the public parking that's there that currently noses into the new area where there's a retaining wall. So I'll stop there and see if there's any questions, but essentially this request, the zoning, the variances are to allow them to go forward with the legal work to define this in a different legal way.
Any questions for staff from council? I can't see Councillor Hoare, but maybe if you have a question, just speak up. Okay, no questions. Would the applicant like to speak? Is the applicant online, do we know?
I received a text from the person who was going to speak, and he had an emergency in the hospital, so he's
Oh.
okay, but he will not be able to make it. He thought he'd be out in time. He will not be able to make it.
Okay, well, I
It's
hope
not for a lack of interest.
he's okay.
Yes.
All right, so would council like to make a motion? There are 2 recommendations, and they can be moved together.
Yeah, I can do that. I can try that.
Councillor Anderson?
I will move the council give first and second reading to the District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1355, 2024. And I will further move that council direct staff to give notice for a public hearing to be held on District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1355, 2024, and Development Variance Permit 24-04.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? Okay, call the question. All those in favour? None opposed? That carries. Thank you, Mr. Gregg. The next bylaw item is 7.2, Permissive Tax Exemption Bylaw. This report will be presented by the Director of Finance, Mr. Cadman.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'll start by giving a bit of a breakdown of the tax exemptions, and then there'll be partly a discussion where we'll get some feedback from council. So basically, the exemptions, the district's able to grant eligible property tax exemptions to properties that are either rent from us or are not-for-profits. We currently have 2 groups of exemptions. So the first one is the religious organizations. We give them the maximum 10 years. So those will be coming due in 2027. So what I've proposed is that we line up this group for 3 years so that they'll come due at the same time. And then that way the next council will be able to review the current exemptions after their first year in council. Exemptions must be sent to BC Assessment by October 31st. Our current deadline to receive applications is September 1st. It's difficult to review the applications and give the applicants time to speak before our October 31st deadline. So it is proposed that moving forward, we move the deadline for applications to June. We can change our policy. That way we'll give the applicants time to discuss in front of council if that's what council would like to do. As per our policy, organizations that rent or lease space from the district were not required to apply. All other organizations had to send in an application by September 1st. So in the package in front of you, we have 2 appendices. We have Appendix A and Appendix B. Appendix A summarizes all the properties that are subject to the permissive tax exemption bylaw. They were there in previous years, and the recommendation is to move them forward for the next 3 years. It's difficult to estimate what the assessment will be for the values. So in the past, what we've done is we've built in a 5% estimate into what that will look like for the next 3 years. So we've continued that same as this year. Where it's changed is in Appendices B. These are where we've identified 2 properties that per our policy we don't feel matches, but it's up to council's discretion. So the first policy that we have reviewed is the Kuis property. So they have 2 properties. They have one that has received the exemption in the past. This has a building on it. It provides service. The second property that they have is vacant land. It is strange to provide exemptions for vacant land. The idea behind the exemption is to give a break to organizations that provide services to the community. And based on our policy, it was felt that vacant land doesn't provide active services to the community. The second thing is we ask applicants to include a copy of their financial statements, annual report, budget, and then I review these, look at income levels, revenue generation, cash, reserve, investment quantity, things like this, to make sure that we're giving the exemptions to people that actually need it. In our policy, it's stated that the exemption is given to companies, and when it's given, it shouldn't be built into their budget. They need to look at funding other then use for funding to try and get off of the exemption. It shouldn't be something that is just expected and looked at like a grant. So based on this, after review of the Redfish Restoration Society, I recommend that we exclude them from the permissive tax exemption bylaw. It is staff's opinion that Redfish Financial Health, they do not require the tax exemption to continue operations. So those are the two properties that we included in Appendices B. One, because the vacant land, we didn't feel that they were providing active service. And then B, Redfish, after reviewing annual reports for the last several years, we felt that they can afford to pay the property tax. As a note, given the short notice period and the facts that Euclid Aquarium Society, they have received the exemption in the past. After reviewing their financial statements, they do seem healthy, but we don't feel that with this short amount of notice, that it would be fair to remove them from the exemption bylaw. So it is suggested that we include them in this 3 years, but that we review in the next 3 years to see if we should give them a partial, a full, or just review at that time. So there's a few recommendations in front of you. The first one is to go ahead with as suggested. The second there, Joey helped put that together. Thanks, Joey, for putting that together. Based on your review, we can choose to either add or delete from the proposed organizations that are in the bylaw. And then the C would be to not go ahead with the exemptions at all and just collect that all as property tax. Is there any questions?
Does council have any questions for staff? I do note that we received an email from Redfish earlier today, and they wish to speak to this tax exemption or lack of, and I will allow that. Yes, please.
Do I have pen on my face? My pen exploded. Do I have pen?
Thanks for the opportunity to address you. I know many of you, but not everyone. I'm Jen Dart. I am the Operations and Development Manager for Redfish, and Mako Noel is our chair. So as I mentioned in my last minute email letter, thanks for taking the time to read that. The application that we submitted, our year end for 2023, did not occur until March 31st. So the financial statement for this past year that we submitted was not complete. There's definitely more expenses to be included on it. We're gearing up for our AGM next week, so the financial statements will be finalized this week. We're happy to send those to you so you have a more accurate picture of our last fiscal year. We wanted to point out that our organization is coming up on 30 years in 2025. And during the time that we've been in operation, formerly under the name of Central West Coast Forest Society, the organization has made significant investments into West Coast communities in terms of employment and spending. And additionally, our work has restored ecosystems around Barkley and Clayoquot Sound in partnership with local First Nations to ameliorate wild salmon habitat impacted primarily by historical logging. And as you may know, the organization purchased the old Murray's Grocery Building at 1728 Peninsula Road in the past year. This is a huge leap for a nonprofit organization such as ours, and it's been yet many years in the making, as Mako can attest to. And our plan is to provide a community amenity in the form of a stewardship center that both educates and showcases the work that we do, as well as the communities of the West Coast. As you are probably also aware, that building is very old. It requires extensive renovation, and we're hoping to revitalize this building in the heart of Ucluelet to make it a welcoming space for locals and visitors, with meeting and event space that will be available to the community in addition to that educational center. But we do need your support to make this a reality. We are a registered charity dependent on government funding, and that is always subject to change, as are our funding programs. So what we are requesting is that 3-year extension while we attempt to get this project off the ground, similar to the concession made for the Euclid Aquarium Society, an organization that has also worked tirelessly to provide a community amenity. Thanks for your consideration. I think Mako might. Okay, great.
Thank you, Mayor Worship, Mayor and Council. I do appreciate you guys giving us a moment to speak here. I think Jen's noted all our concerns. It was a bit of a surprise to us that staff had reported that perhaps that we didn't meet the bill. I just really want to take our stance. I'm involved in two groups, Redfish as well as the Food Bank. Both great initiatives, and I have a strong belief that the nonprofits have to take a stance of not always being broke and being poor and putting their hand out and having a home base to call home. I think I will let you guys have your general dialogue. I'll just leave you with the fact is I don't think that Redfish should be punished because someone in the staff deems that that we're financially stable. If you looked at our history over the last I've been with them for 12 years. It's not always been rosy. We took a big leap of faith here to make ourselves our own building. And being your ex-mayor, I'm very familiar with this. My signature's on the on this bylaw, but it caught me off guard a little bit that we would be revisiting things like the food bank or the aquarium. These are big initiatives in our community that need to be supported, I believe, from U5, and please giving direction to your staff of what these amenities really are for. And I want to say thank you again for allowing us a few minutes to speak before you. Thanks.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Redfish? Just before you leave the microphone?
Question?
No? Okay, you're
Thank-
free to go. Yeah, the Redfish one did sort of take me by surprise too, just because I know that they recently purchased a building, and that they have been operating for 30 years and doing some fantastic work in the community, for all our neighboring communities as well. Any further discussion from council? Thoughts?
Yeah, I was really pleased to see what they did with the building. For one, it's turned into sort of it's beautiful when you drive by. My wife has commented on how nice it looks, and we're really building sort of another community gathering space centered around environmental stewardship. So I think now is not the time to put them on the ropes, and I would like to see them included in this bylaw personally.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I think I would I would also agree. I would agree that it's a benefit to the community, and it falls under the purpose of the tax break in this case, that it has that benefit in an environmental sense as well. So I think we're pretty lucky to have Redfish here, and I understand that it's not considered a grant situation, but at the same time, I think as they're growing and they just purchased a building, and it is a not for profit. I think it's up to us to help these guys along as we can and do the most we can. So I would agree.
Thank you. Councillor Mafty?
I just speak to one of the points that Mr. Noel made, that these nonprofit organizations are the strength of our community. They face tremendous challenges, and the notion that a nonprofit has to be broke, has to be struggling, has to be scraping by is something that I think is it's a detrimental attitude, and I don't think a registered charitable organization should be punished or looked askance at because they're in a financially stable state. I think that's the ideal, and so I would definitely support the exemption on those grounds alone. And I think as a community we need to recognize that these are two of many organizations that really promote stewardship, community resilience, and we should be doing what we can as a community to encourage that and to support that. So no disrespect to the finance department, but that's my view on it.
I especially was sort of taken aback because it was the first time they've asked for this tax exemption, because it's the first time they've owned a building, and I thought that if anything, a first-time break is a welcome thing for a nonprofit. Yeah, Councillor Hoare, anything from you?
I concur with what's been stated. Redfish does amazing work for the community and for the ecosystems around us in Barclay and in Clayoquot, and the fact that they're trying to build this stewardship center. Well, they are building it, I think they do deserve a break, and I'm fully supportive of them being included for this 3-year pass. Just saying.
Thank you. I think we're all in agreement, and so we would be looking at option B. Is that correct, Mr. Rotenberg? If we want to include Redfish in the tax exemption bylaw?
Yeah, so our recommendation, if you'd like to amend the bylaw, would be to give the bylaw a first and second reading as presented. And then we have a motion, and then I'll help lead you through a motion to amend the bylaw. And then you would give the bylaw third reading as amended. Are there any other amendments that council is seeking?
I think that's the only one for me. Anybody else have anything else?
No, there's no other amendment, but I was just wondering, the ANAF didn't make it on there, I guess, either, do they, on this one? Did they?
Yeah, so the ANAF didn't submit an application. So I sent out an original email July 2nd, and then Keely was fantastic, and the finance staff is great at following up. We sent out 3 emails and some phone calls, and we never heard back.
I think Ms. Kelleher's probably overworked and overwhelmed with stuff to do there. That's unfortunate. But when was the cutoff? What's the cutoff date for that? Is it?
So per the policy, it's for September 1st. Joey did mention that potentially council might be able to overrule that, but that's Joey's realm.
Right.
Well, it'd be difficult to offer them anything without an application, though, wouldn't it?
It would be, especially because we have to get the bylaw submitted by October 31st. There is options available, so we could look at grant and aid for next year. So there is options, but to get them into the exemptions, we need to have the bylaw submitted by the 31st, which means we have to give the first 3 readings. I believe it's 2 weeks before, because we have to give a notice period.
Right. So we can encourage them to apply for the grant and aid in the fall.
Yeah, so we can encourage them to apply for the grant and aid in the fall for this year, and then we could encourage them to apply for next year's tax exemption. We could do this again for next October.
Okay, so just because they're missing out on
This
this
year.
one doesn't mean they will miss out on the whole 3-year
Exactly.
period. Okay, good to know.
Well, thank you.
We also noted a typo on the bylaw. Right at the certified correct line, it looks like it says District of Ucluelet Permissive Tax Exemption Bylaw.
Twice, yeah.
Number 1358. Along with we'd recommend an amendment to remove the second bylaw.
Okay. All right. Well, let's start with a motion. I will move that council give District of Ucluelet Permissive Tax Exemption Bylaw number 1358, 2024, first and second reading. Do I have a seconder?
Should be. Yeah. Sorry. I'll second that.
Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Next step is to amend the bylaw, Mr. Rotenberg?
That's correct. We've got a draft of the amendment here. It's a little bit complicated, so I'll just have you review it first. We can also show you the red line version of the bylaw before you move ahead. So why don't we show them the red line version first? So in order to do that, I know this is one of those ones that we don't vote for, and then we have to kill that one.
Yeah, no, that gets... Can we not just read option B?
There's very specific language There's very specific language associated with this, so we just want to make sure that you guys see what you're doing here, because the title for the property needs to be included within the bylaw, so you have to read the title itself. So, Nancy, why don't you make that quite large for them if you can? Okay, so the amendments that I understand we're making here would be to include exemption of Redfish Restoration Society as K, so 2K on the bylaw. And as well, if you scroll down a little bit, Nancy, it would be to delete the second bylaw in the certified correct section. And now we'll present the associated language for the amendment of the bylaw.
All right. Would someone like to make that motion?
I can do it.
Okay, Councillor Hoare, go for it.
Nobody else likes these big long ones, but I don't mind. I will move that council amend District of Ucluelet permissive tax exemption bylaw number 1358 2024 by A, deleting the word and at the end of section 2 subsection 1, B, deleting the word, which is a period, at the end of section 2 subsection J and inserting a semicolon, C, inserting the heading exemption for Redfish Restoration Society after section 2 subsection J, and D, inserting Redfish Restoration Society roll number 168000 being Lot A, Plan BIP 23074, District Lot 282, Clayoquot Land District, PID 003-221-784, 1728 Peninsula Road, that is owned and used by Redfish Restoration Society for restoration, research, and education. And as section 2, subsection K, and E, deleting the word bylaw after the word bylaw in the certified correct section of the bylaw.
Thank you.
I'll second that.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? That carries. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg, for your work on that amendment. We are now moving on to the report section of our agenda. There are 4 report items. The first report item is 8.1, preliminary discussion, 221 Monado Road.
Sorry. Was there a motion to give a third reading as amended?
Oh, no.
No, we need to do that. All right, I will move that we give...
Why don't you present the motion for them? So that was the third slide? The third slide. Just one second.
Oh, okay.
Apologies, too many things at the same time. Two more. There you go. Oh, sorry. Where did we go?
Okay, I will move that council give third reading to District of Ucluelet permissive tax exemption bylaw number 1358 2024 as amended. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Kennington seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
None opposed? That carries. All right, are we done with that one now? I think I think part of the script is incorrect. The 8.1 is the living organ donor support policy. So I'm going to go off script here for a minute. We are now moving on to the report section of our agenda. There are 4 report items. Actually, there's 5. One is a verbal, I believe. The first one is the living organ donor support policy. Would this be Mr. Cadman?
The published agenda has the AIR report first.
It's 8.4 on my agenda.
Can you switch it around? So, the agenda on mine is AIR first. Yes. But on hers, it is.
Mine is living organ donor. We'll just go by mine.
We just want to make sure it's in order so that it's everybody else's as well.
Agenda. I'd rather just go off this one. This is
So let's just get a motion to amend the agenda to do it in the order that you have on your agenda.
okay. I'll make a motion to amend the agenda to make it in the order that my agenda is in.
And what's the first item on your agenda?
First item is 8.1, living organ donor support policy. Number 8.2 is ADU covenant authorization. 8.3, Chamber of Commerce. 8.4, Monado Road. 8.5, housing update.
So we'll also need a motion to delete 8.5.
I need a seconder for, oh, you want that as part of that first motion?
Yeah, just make it part of the first motion. So do 8.1, 8.2, 8.3, and 8.4, and then scratch 8.5.
Delete 8.5. Okay, can I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. All right, Mr. Cadman.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor. So at the July 30th, 2024 council meeting, staff was directed by council to prepare a report outlining the implications of joining the Kidney Foundation of Canada's Living Donor Circle of Excellence program. So they're actually excellent to work with. They provided a whole lot of stats and actually helped develop the policy. So to qualify for the program, employers must support employees by providing a minimum of 4 weeks leave at 80% salary. The Kidney Foundation provides the calculation on that. So assuming a medium salary of 60 grand at the 80% support level, that comes to $4,000 roughly. So the district has proposed that we fully support the employees for those 4 weeks. So 100% at those 4 weeks at the minimum level. So if you use the same formula, it comes to $5,000. According to the statistics, only 15 in 1 million people give organs. So the probability of this coming true is very low, and the cost itself is quite low. So it's not something that we need to build into the budget. It's something that we could afford to change our operations in any given year to facilitate. The policy has no overlap with long-term disability, so it doesn't affect qualifying for long-term disability. Any medication, hospitalization, or rehab associated with the surgery is covered under extended health. So the recommendation is to go ahead with the support policy that we have. It's the appendices there. And if there's any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for staff?
What if everybody on staff donated at the same time?
I would be shocked.
I can make this motion.
Go ahead, Councillor Anderson.
I will move that council adopt the District of Ucluelet Living Organ Donor Support Policy number 7-2550-1.
Do I have a seconder? Second. Councillor Mafty seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Thank you for doing that, Mr. Cadman. Uh, 8.2 is ADU covenant authorization for 359 Marine Drive. Mr. Gregg.
Mine's in the right order.
Thank you, and through the mayor. So this is a covenant that's essentially an operational matter, if you will. It's required by the zoning bylaw to have this for the construction of this new ADU. As noted in the report, this is the kind of thing that we're working on a delegation of authorities bylaw that may make this the sort of thing that wouldn't have to come to council, but at this point in time, it needs authorization for council. So really, it's to see if there's any questions about the process. I'm prepared to answer them.
Questions for staff? It's pretty straightforward, I think. Would someone like to make the recommendation?
I'll move that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute the Section 219 restrictive covenant for 359 Marine Drive for registration at the Land Title Office.
Thank you. Councillor Mafty, do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. The third item is Chamber of Commerce Economic Development Initiative. Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor. Before council is a report that details the requested access to funds by the Chamber of Commerce. So I'll just go through a little bit of the background. So in September 2023, request was made for $35,000 for the Chamber to apply for the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program, the REDIT program, for a 2-year project to broaden goals of developing an ongoing system of data collection analysis, intent to identify resiliency, sustainability, and recovery strategies. This was all surrounding the disruption to businesses due to the Cameron Lake fire. Unfortunately, that grant application was not approved, and in February of 2024, the Chamber came back and said, well, we didn't get the application, but we would still like to move forward with the program. Council advised the Chamber at that point in time to resubmit an application because it was tied specifically to the REDIT application that they had made, which was not complete or not granted, unfortunately. So in September 3rd of 2024, the Chamber presented an updated proposal for additional funding to access that $35,000. The updated proposal was to develop a Ucluelet Economic Development Capacity Building Initiative, which in general terms, the intent of the program is to work collaboratively with local and regional stakeholders, support the Chamber Economic Development Committee, develop sustainability model, collect key data points for local businesses, apply for an additional REDIP grant in the future, hire a coordinator, and work towards building capacity for sustainable economic development in Ucluelet. The proposal requests access to that $35,000, which was included within the 2024 fiscal year. So it's included in the budget. It is sitting there and available if council wishes to allocate those funds for this purpose. The program would fund the Chamber for April 2024 through March of 2025. And then the Chamber is also asking for additional supports for consideration moving forward into future years. So the 25-26 and 26-27. So a total of 3 years. So they're asking for an additional $35,000 for those 2 fiscal years as well. So within the budget, we've included that initial $35,000 because it was a one-time grant opportunity. It was not continued in the financial plan. So in in the deliberations for future 5-year financial plan, we would need to add that back in as an additional expense into future budgets if council wishes to consider that during the budget process. In general, the district doesn't have an economic development arm or department within the organization. We try to do this a little bit off the side of the desk, and it's fairly low priority in compared to other higher issues and housing initiatives and all the other things that we're doing. So this could be a very good partnership to develop with the Chamber of Commerce. It helps the Chamber of Commerce facilitate economic development in the community, build relationships, and it also builds partnering relationships between the district, Ucluelet Chamber of Commerce, and those businesses. So staff feel that this is probably a good investment to move economic development strategies forward. Council is already participating on the Economic Development Committee as well. So we're recommending that Council give consideration to allocating that first $35,000 and then direct staff to include that additional $35,000 for 25 and 2026 in the financial plan for council's consideration for the as part of that budgetary process. Happy to answer any questions if council has any.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Any questions for staff? We pretty much covered it with your presentation at the last meeting. So there are 3 recommended motions, and they can be moved together.
I'll move that council direct staff to provide a letter of support for the Chamber of Commerce 2024 Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program grant application in support of a community economic development capacity building project. I'll further move that council direct staff to allocate $35,000 to the Chamber of Commerce in support of the Community Economic Development Capacity Building Project for 2024. And I'll further move that council direct staff to include for consideration an allocation of $35,000 in the 2025 and 2026 budgets for the development of an economic development agreement with the Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Councillor Mafty. Do I have a seconder?
No, second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries. Congratulations. And you probably need that letter of support pretty quick, right? October 21st, you have to have it in by. Okay, we'll get it to you. Template is great. Thank you. All right, now 8.4, preliminary discussion 221 Monado Road and Arif. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, and through the mayor. So this report, it's well, essentially there's an application that is taking shape that council initially has had an introduction from Arif, who made a delegation to council in June. Staff have been in discussions, I think since May. In May, we were introduced to the group, and they're looking really seriously at bringing some really interesting housing potentially to Ucluelet. And they most recently had an open house in early September, on September 11th, I believe. So there are some questions that have come up in all our discussions because they really want to move quickly, and certainly the district community, the community of Ucluelet, can use housing yesterday. So part of this really is identifying what are the questions that need to be answered, what are the information that's missing. There's some technical information. Staff have been in those discussions of what are the pieces that need to be sort of filled in. Some of that was known from the prior rezoning in 2022. There's some really specifically the 3 big ones that were kind of still needing to see some resolution is on the tsunami risk and the how to mitigate the flood hazard on the site, environmental assessment of the complete environmental assessment of the site, and also archaeological assessment of the impacts of the development. And so those pieces are sort of on the technical side, but other questions are more a matter of sort of community feel or policy, and then really council are the decision makers. And so in order to kind of keep things moving very quickly, because they would like to move very quickly, we brought this report together for council to consider. So I just, as you know, Mr. Rotenberg will help me or caution me as well to remind council that this isn't a decision point. It is early. We haven't received a complete application, and that council needs to keep an open mind for that application when it comes forward. There's public input as part of that. But really this is a chance to kind of test that sort of temperature and see if there's, you know, sort of where the feel is. So that's a little looser. And I hope that comes through in the report, that really it's a sense of, and it may seem counterintuitive, and that the report may seem a little bit negative of saying like, well, what about this and what about this, and they're sort of pointing at things in the preliminary materials for an application. But part of getting to an approval quickly, and part of getting to, you know, get to yes faster, is also to see if there are any hurdles or stumbling blocks or things that need to be addressed. The quicker we can identify them actually helps the applicant, helps the developer to see, okay, do we need to change our plans? So that's really what the spirit of this is, to bring it forward and say, are there any showstoppers or concerns that are leaving council members scratching their head or going, I see that being a community concern. A discussion rather than a motion or no motions or decisions here, but a discussion of those comments of sort of what's the temperature on that. Could be very helpful for both staff and for the applicants to move forward with this. So there are a number of questions kind of posed in the report. The site plan, you know, preliminary site plan is in the attached in the appendix. I can pull it up on the screen if that would help. But really, it's meant to sort of be a prompting for discussion at the council table. And we understand, you know, obviously you've had, you know, a lot of introduction on the concept, but really a lot of this is really about the site. As opposed to, as you say, they have this very creative approach to try and deliver housing that's high quality and address some of the construction costs by using a pretty innovative approach to some modular technologies. But really, a lot of these questions really come down to this proposed site and location. I'm going to pause there and see, are there questions, and how would council like to proceed, or just sort of work through the questions that are in the report?
Questions for staff? No, I think we'll just work through the questions.
Okay, so I'll just let's move forward then. The first then really came up with around the site access and the orientation and the road layout. And what's shown on the preliminary plans is different than our road standard, and that it's essentially that in a high level, 2-story buildings, 6, 8 units, depending on the number and the configuration of them, within the buildings, and surface parking. The surface parking spots, most of them back out onto the road. And so that's one of the things that is quite a difference from our road standard. And so that's really being prompted to see if there's any concerns from council on that.
All right, so the first question is...
It's on page 61.
Do I have a different agenda than everybody else? I'm on page 83.
It sounds like yours got shuffled. So what I see is the one that says, do council members have any initial concerns about a road configuration? There's limited pedestrian facilities, and the vehicle parking areas will be backing onto the roadway. So that shows page 61 on my agenda.
Yeah, it's page 83 on mine.
Why don't we send Nancy the questions, and then we can present them on the screen right here, and then you guys can walk through them all together.
Sure, let's
Or
do
you
that.
can,
I can just open them up on the agenda.
yeah, just open them on the agenda.
Sorry, Mayor. This is up for you.
Keeping you on your toes.
I just picked it up yesterday, so it's not like it's version or anything.
Yeah, I was using the HTML one instead of the PDF, so I never know what the page number is. Yeah.
Go into the download.
want to start with this one?
Yes.
Thank you, sorry.
And I note from your report that the plan includes a total of 398 surface parking spaces. Is that correct?
Yes, throughout the development.
Okay, so the question is, do council members generally support a road configuration with limited pedestrian facilities and vehicle parking spaces backing onto the roadway? Discussion?
I guess I'll start.
Okay.
Currently, I don't really see a difference between this and the street I live on, where everybody backs out onto the street and the children play hockey on the street, and we had pickleball courts painted on the road. And it's not to say that I don't think it's necessarily different from what we currently have throughout the community. Maybe just in the way it's written on paper as to what the use is, but I personally don't have a problem with it, and I don't think that should be something that holds up a development of such significance.
It's not a showstopper.
It's not a showstopper for me.
Councillor Mafty?
I would concur, and I'd further add that a lot of these questions that come up, having had the benefit of hearing from Arif and seeing their presentation, I've in my own mind come to look at this project rather holistically, and I think that there are a lot of constraints to the site, to the overall scope of the project, that they mean that we're going to have to accept some compromises. I don't think that this is anything to get overly worried about as a preliminary plan. There's nothing that sets off any alarm bells for me here.
Yeah, I think the configuration of the whole property is meant to create density, which is what's going to keep the affordability aspect, right? So this is just part and parcel of that. Councillor Anderson?
I agree with all that. I wouldn't even add anything to that. I think you've covered it.
Councillor Hoare, anything to add?
Well, I agree that, it's not necessarily a showstopper, but I do not want pedestrian, a pathway to be completely ignored. There should be some sort of pathway. So that is just my feeling on that one. I don't like the vehicle backing onto the roadway, but I hear you, Councillor Kennington. That is what is happening in a number of the subdivisions, and a big part of this is getting some density. So it may not be the prettiest, but while I can agree with the cars backing onto the roadway, I have a little bit more concern with there not being pedestrian pathways.
Okay, thank you for that. Shall we move on then to the next question? Do you want to do any preamble for it, Mr. Gregg? This is the parkland dedication.
Certainly, I would just reiterate that in 2022, when the property was being rezoned, there was a housing application, and then rezoning went through, and the current owners of the property, as part of that, had proposed and promised to dedicate the marine shoreline and stream corridor as park, and that's been completed. So there was a significant park dedication that was part of the site, and so the essentially confirmation that additional parkland dedication wouldn't be required is one of the requests or questions from Arif, that there is a legal ability to require up to 5% of the land for park dedication, and so essentially we're putting this forward, and the caveat there is just understanding that, and it is shown on their plan, an area that would be, I think they label it as park, whether it's private or public is not sort of clear, but to have potentially some play space or gathering space within this. Essentially, it's a new neighborhood. The scale of it, that's worth considering. But so that's sort of the genesis of the question, I guess.
No, I've got them all. one's the same. Do council members generally support the concept of no additional parkland dedication for this development? Do you want to start us off, Councillor
Sure.
Kennington?
It sounds like a terrible idea, but the reality is that the park dedication has already been made, and the district has control of that asset, and it's considerable, and it's I think it's good enough.
Councillor Mafty?
I'd agree with that. I'd make two follow-up comments. Two things that jump out at me here, and I'll start with the latter of the two. ARIF requesting that constructing trails costs borne by the municipality. I don't see a problem with that. I think that they've been very forthright about trying to approach this project as, you know, what can we do to increase the bang for the buck, keep costs down. So I'm quite willing to meet them on a, you know, pragmatic playing field there. I do agree with the sentence in here, you know, highlighting the ecological value of Olsen Bay. I think that this is a much larger discussion to be had, and it's beyond the scope of this quick run through here. But I'd love to revisit this. I do think that is a sensitive ecosystem. I do think that it behooves us to consider potential impacts now so that we can plan for them. I'd hate to see that whole waterline area, you know, I'd like to see it protected to the best of our ability, and I think that we have every chance of doing that with ARIF moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I think I would agree with Councillor Kennington that there seems to be a sufficient amount of parkland dedicated to the municipality at this point, and then again, it's an efficient use of space, and we have to, you know, we have to do what we have to do to get the affordable housing in there.
Councillor Hoare?
I'm a little concerned not having the complete environmental assessment and wetland delineation that might actually ID more spaces that should be protected. But I do understand there's already been a large park dedication here, so I'm cautiously not concerned. Does that make sense?
Sure, and I think they are in the process of getting the environmental assessment completed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next up is constructing trails. Mr. Gregg?
Thank you, and through the mayor. So with there's a covenant that's registered on the title of the property that was offered by the owners for the rezoning in 2022 to basically commit them to developing according to the plans that they'd submitted for the public hearing for the rezoning and for a few other things, further studies around flooding and whatnot. But also they had offered to bear the cost of constructing trails, and it was laid out so it'd be phased so that as more construction of housing happens that it wouldn't all be up front. So there'd be sort of phased construction, but that those costs would be borne by the developer. What's being requested currently is whether council would consider waiving that, so that essentially as the comment of protecting Olsen Bay from, you know, traffic or foot traffic and impacts, part of that is ensuring that, you know, if we have a whole neighborhood of people, you can imagine people will find their way to the water if there isn't, you know, sort of proper facilities in place. So that's where the timing of this is really before you have people living on that site. There, I would argue there would need to be some facilities to essentially manage that within the park space, which is now publicly owned. So really, it comes down to sort of the cost and then timing as they are moving, wishing to move forward on a quite quick timeline. That would mean that this needs to, you know, really staff would need to be looking at how do we get this into the capital projects to be able to do the permitting and construction of trails in time, so that there isn't a case where you have new residents who are now just sort of finding their way through the woods and through the stream, and now you start getting trails that can actually do more damage. So that's where the question comes from for council to
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gregg. So do council members have any initial concerns with the concept of taking on the cost of constructing the trails and making this a priority capital project so that trails can be completed prior to occupancy of the site by new residents? Shall we start at the other end, Councillor Anderson?
Sorry, I didn't see that coming. Yeah, I mean, my answers are similar for a lot of these, and as much as the way it's worded, it sounds like it's kind of putting the onus back on us, but at the same time, I feel like the only way that this type of thing moves forward, because and keeping it as cost, not being like cost prohibitive, keeping the cost so low and making it affordable is by doing things that are similar to this. So as much as, yeah, we're in a housing crisis, right? So I love the trails. The trails are super important. I believe that, but I think that we can probably bear that cost. And on top of that, I think there's also and I'm not totally sure how this would work in that particular case, but if this is public land and this is a trail, I think this is something that we could use RMI money funding for in the future as well. So I don't think putting that onus onto the developer that's doing so much to house people that are desperate right now, I wouldn't hold their feet to the fire on something like this.
Yes, I believe RMI money would be eligible for trails. Yes, Mr. Lawrence confirms. Councillor Mafti?
Yeah, I'd sort of echo the comments I made before, and I just would add one thing at this point, and just to sort of shed some light onto the interactions that we've had with AIRF. I think one of the things that set this developer apart is they were quite forthright sharing their pro formas and their costs, and I think the reality is that they've so far met us in good faith, and they've showed us what they're looking to invest and what their margins are, and I think it would be a mistake to put them in a position where going into the project they're on the hook for a major financial investment that is completely separate from what they've approached us to do, which is to build affordable housing. So I stand by my concern about stewarding the ecological integrity of the habitat there, and I think the trails are important. But the fact that we as a community have access to other funds makes it a pretty easy thing to take off of their plate, at least, as far as these opening discussions go.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kennington?
Well, I'm speechless. They took all my points, so I have nothing further to add. I agree that this is an ecologically sensitive area, and potentially we need to look at something temporary as far as protecting it while the trail gets built, and not say that we have to build that trail before this housing is occupied. And I think that there may be a more cost-effective solution to doing that protection while we figure out the funds to build the trail, which hasn't yet come to council for approval. So we don't even know that a trail's going in there because we haven't discussed it.
That's true. There may be differing opinions on that too. Councillor Hoare?
I will just iterate that absolutely we need to do something to protect that site. We don't want people in the housing accessing this with no protection. That's what the idea of the trail is for, and this is such a highly sensitive ecosystem that that absolutely has to be a priority. We do have access potentially to RMI funds, other funds, so I have no problem with taking over the cost, but I do think it needs to be prioritized so that it moves along, speedily. And yes, we do need to have the trail conversation in council as well. I agree with that. But yeah, I just absolutely don't want to see housing there with no protection for that that ecosystem, that mud flats.
Great, thank you. The next section is to do with Peninsula Road 30-meter buffer and further lot clearing. Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, yes, as this highlighted in the report, that there are policies adopted in the official community plan around not just fully clearing large development sites, and also this very specific one that talks to Peninsula Road around the entrance to town and that 30-meter treed buffer. Again, the rezoning in 2022 maintained that 30-meter buffer, and so on not essentially not just the policy but also the covenant that's on the title, sort of holds them to that development plan. That would be one of the things that would need to be changed or replaced as part of approvals for the current proposal. So this one is quite is obviously the approach is they're looking to maximize the use of the site for housing, and this is an impact which obviously it seems to be in conflict with that desire on the community level. So hence the question.
So the question is, do council have any initial concerns with the proposal to remove a 30-meter treed buffer along Highway 4 and substantial tree clearing throughout the developable lands that would maximize the area for housing constructions on the 221 Monado Road site, and which would diverge from OCP policies 3.162, 3.163, and 3.171, meant to limit the clearing of trees and changes to the public entrance to town? Who wants to start? Councillor Mafty, we'll start with you this time.
I have some initial concerns. I understand where Arif's coming from. I think we need to have a pretty more detailed conversation with them. I think that I want, personally, I'd like to see those trees there for a number of reasons, some of which have been highlighted in the report. It's the entrance to the community. I think it's to the benefit of the people living there that they have that buffer. I've spoken out against what I've considered to be, reckless or unnecessary tree removal in the past, and I'm certainly not going to change that opinion now. Having said that, the reality is that the bulk of this lot has already been cleared. What's remaining there is of questionable ecological value in terms of terrestrial habitat, which I think the mudflat habitat is critical. The forest habitat is mostly second growth scrub, but I don't want to see those trees cut down. I think this is something that we should really listen to what the public has to say. I'm one person, and if people as a community feel that this is something that they really want, I'd listen to them, because this really is something that is going to affect everyone driving into the community as well as the people living there. I do understand that Arif has some concerns. You can't have a treed lot that you're also going to create high density housing in. So I'd like to find a compromise, but I do have some initial concerns.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kennington?
Of course, everybody loves trees. I love trees too.
You too?
I do. I love them too. Yeah, they're great. It's interesting how we talk about the entrance to town, and currently our entrance to town is you drive through a forest and end up at a pile of tires. And I'm thinking that, we have an opportunity to change how we enter the town, to sort of increase its visual value, and create a place where you enter into a community of homes rather than a gas station and a lumber yard and various other things before you get into the heart of our community. And I think, if housing is as critical as we all know it is, I think there's going to be tough choices to be made now and in the future about how we deliver the 800 homes that we have to deliver in the next 20 years to meet our housing targets. And, this site is disturbed, and I don't necessarily see it as a negative visual impact. And all it essentially does is it moves that treed entrance to town just 800 meters out. And I don't think that's a good enough reason to hold up literally hundreds of housing units for people who are literally crying about it. So, if we want to gauge what the community is looking for, everyone I've talked to, if they were against this project to start, are now for the project once they understand it. And then there's the people who obviously understand the project from the get-go and are so excited that it's impossible to ignore. So that's how I feel about that.
Yeah, this is another one of those sacrifices that that may need to occur in order to get that density for the housing to make it affordable. And yeah, it's not ideal for sure, but it could be worse. It could be another stack of used tires.
That's the next point. I think they want to install a stack of used tires.
Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said, and yeah, I think you're right. When you come into town, there's a couple questionable sight lines there, but yeah, and the way I understood it with the OCP stipulations with the tree coverage, it felt more to me like a form and character situation as opposed to an ecological refuge. And like I agree that it's a short piece, and you know we've sort of we've saved that area down on the wetland, which to me seems, in my mind, is a more valuable piece for protection. Not that it's all valuable, but yeah, I don't want to sound biased, but I think if you come into town and you look on the the left-hand side as you're coming in, and you see this innovative solution for a housing crisis in a small town at the end of the road, I think it's like, if you're going to showcase something in your town that's like, we did something right, I think this is something that I would want to show.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoare?
Well, it's hard for me to agree to get rid of a tree buffer, as we all know how I feel about trees. I do understand that to get density, we need to narrow it down, but dropping it to as narrow, I mean, basically making it non-existent, I find I have problems with that. Yeah. I mean, I do understand we need density. I do understand that means we need the land, but I worry about narrowing that buffer. Maybe it doesn't need to be 30 meters, but I really have an issue with it.
I think there's also an issue when you do clear a lot of trees, that the ones that remain standing can become danger trees because they've been protected by the other trees for so long. I think McMillan Bloedel figured that out in their forested site that we all drive through on our way to Port Alberni. So that may be another reason to remove the trees, so that it's not, so that there aren't some danger trees that might just be blown over in the first storm. Just a thought.
Yeah, that is true, and we are going to have problems because of the fact that the trees were cleared too close to the upper edge of that property. Those trees are very likely to go over in a storm because it's too narrow a buffer. And that's in the parkland dedication, right? So
right.
It's the wider the buffer of trees, the more likely they are to remain standing. So
right.
I just don't see the point in their tiny little strip of green at that point.
Yeah, I think it's probably removed. Anyway, all right. We'll move on to the next question. Highway 4 speed reduction.
Yes, through the mayor. Essentially, this is a question about is there support for changing the point at which highway speed slows down as you're entering town? And we're sort of noting that, and certainly the traffic engineers who have looked at the site here with this new neighborhood and the access on the highway, there's some real benefits to lowering it to 50 kilometers earlier. And as noted in the report as well, I think we're all aware of some of the existing situations and discomfort that happens when all the parking that happens near the trailhead for the Ancient Cedars as well. So that was sort of some of the thought of like, well, if we're asking Ministry of Transportation, is there support or concern about that? So it really isn't.
Okay, so the question is, do council members support extending the 50 kilometers per hour speed zone northwest by approximately 1,000 meters, and staff making a request to Modi in advance of receiving a development application by ARIF?
I'll start off on that one.
Okay, thank you.
I am totally for this because that 50-kilometer speed zone should have been moved outside of town a little further a while back. All the parking and stuff that happens around Ancient Cedars has been really unsafe. People dashing across the road and vehicles coming around at speed around the corners. And yeah, so I am totally in support of this one.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I'd echo that 100%. having that slower spot there, and it's always a little dangerous coming around the Ancient Cedars zone there. Always seems a little bit, there's always someone kind of running across the road because they forgot like a dog leash or something, and it's a little scary. But yeah, I just like the idea in general of taking the town and sort of bumping it out a little bit. It kind of makes sense to me, and you're just sort of taking that town line or population and moving it out just a tiny bit more, and that makes sense to me. And I think it said somewhere it was like it would be another 20 seconds to reach town.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we can
That's what
handle
the
that.
report says, yeah.
Yeah.
Councillor Mashti?
I think it would be putting the cart before the horse to approach Modi ahead of the development application if the two are causally linked. If this is something that we want to pursue as a community to increase road safety, you all know how I feel about road safety, so I'd be okay with that.
Mm-hmm. Councillor Kennington?
Yeah, I echo all those sentiments, and I also wonder if there's a greater conversation to have about reducing it then down to 40 through the main drag of town if it's going to be one application and one conversation, because I think it's either Qualicum Beach or that just reduced all their speed limits to great success.
Mm-hmm.
So we were going to talk about reducing speed limits all over town, and maybe it's part of that same conversation. So we look at the whole map of town and decide where those speed limits are. But generally, 50 kilometers an hour. It could be slower, but I'd support that.
Yeah, I would support it as well, and I agree. A bigger conversation, looking at all of town, would be valuable. The next section is qualifying local renters and buyers.
Through the mayor. So this gets to a question of sort of affordability, and essentially, developers like to have flexibility, and communities like to have some assurance when it comes to things like housing agreements, and really, so this is sort of getting to that where the what we've seen so far is sort of in concept affordable and attainable housing, as was done with it. You'll see in the appendix, there's a copy of the covenant that was registered in 2022, and we had a similar conversation going into it of like, okay, well, how specific does this need to be? And really, what gets written into bylaws and housing agreements, the things that start to take shape are pretty black and white. So one of the things is, one of the questions in there is like, who oversees this? We don't have a housing authority function currently. That's something we could contract. And one of the pieces there of like, really, what is the assurance? That detail, I think, needs to take shape as an application actually comes in. It's sort of here to prompt some discussion on, okay, we have some other examples in town. What are we going to need to see as part of a package?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Craig. So the question is, do council members expect that if a zoning amendment and other approvals are granted, the affordable and or attainable housing units would need to be insured through housing agreements and covenants that are administered and monitored by the municipality or an experienced qualified third party? Who wants to start that one?
I could jump on that.
Okay, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah, I was talking to a couple other municipalities about this at the UBCM, which was interesting, but and they thought this was a kind of a unicorn situation. So I agree, like when you have a developer come, and we've had a few of these, and it's almost begrudgingly sometimes that a developer will want to do affordable or attainable, and it's almost like a tug of war to figure that out. And I see like covenants being an important part of that, because it's almost like they'll do as little as possible to make their margins. In this case with Arif, they came to us and we said, what about 30%? And then they said, how about 60? So in this point they're like pushing us to do more affordable, and then we sat down with the numbers at one point, and you guys showed us, and I, it was astounding. I was like, oh my God, this could be, this could actually work out to be incredibly affordable for people. But I agree that I think it has to be run by a housing corporation or some, at an arm's length group, and that was your suggestion as well, I think, the Arif suggestion. So, yeah, I think it's doable, but I think they've gone over and above what we've ever seen before. So, yeah.
And from what I've heard, it doesn't take that long to set up a housing authority.
Yeah, I think, yeah, we talked about that. And could be pretty quick turnaround.
Why has no one brought this idea up before?
Over and over and over.
Yes.
I think it's great because we've always been in this chicken and egg situation. It's like, well, we don't have any housing to manage, and that's why we don't have a housing authority, and we don't have any housing because we need a housing authority. And it's like, at this point, there's a critical mass in the first phase of this development to warrant the formation of a housing authority, which will go on to have greater impacts throughout the community for other smaller housing developments that happen that can be rolled into that housing authority. So this is kind of the Kickstarter for that.
And that was an important point to that is when we were talking about that, they were saying like what were the interests, and they came up with the ideas like doing like community first. So we like obviously be weighting people that were like people that were a nurse, a teacher, someone in the community when you're looking at the affordable parts, and those were their suggestions right off before we even really had a chance to talk about that. So I think that's an important note, is that there will be a vetting process, but it involves a benefit for the community first, and I thought that was a pretty good start for that. That was great.
Councillor Hoare?
Sorry, what's been said is sort of the way I'm feeling about this. We did hear about it in a few ways at UBCM, that definitely we're kind of at that point where a housing authority or third party would be a really worthwhile thing to get going on. I don't think the municipality itself should be trying to do it, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Everybody's spoken that needed to speak on that one?
I'll just jump in there.
Sure.
My short answer to the question is yes, and I think that this is something that's been kicking around my head. I know that we often disagree about a lot on this council, and we often disagree with developers. There's a lot of sort of contentious, material. If there's one thing that I think all of us on the council and in the community have been pretty unequivocal about, it's the need for affordable housing. That's something that's unambiguous, and there's no debate. And so now we have an opportunity to work with a developer that's approaching the project with that need front of mind. I know the chicken and egg argument has been kicking around for a long time. I agree that it's not the municipality's role to necessarily be that entity, but I think that whatever we can do to kickstart it, this would be an opportune time to do so, because I would love to take full advantage of an opportunity to create housing for people in this community who need it. So we'd be, I think, making a mistake not to explore that, encourage it, and support it.
Great, thank you. The next section is the commercial component. Mr. Gregg.
And through the mayor, simply the commercial piece is shown on the corner at Monado Road and Peninsula Road. In the site plan that's been provided, that is in an area that is shown in our official community plan as part of that 30-meter parks and open space buffer. So this would be a change, and so it's really seeing are there red flags to that concept. It's a chance to ask.
So the question is, do council members have any initial concerns with the concept of extending a commercial designation to the area on the corner of Monado Road?
I'll jump in on that one.
Okay.
And I'm going to do it for a reason, based on the person who's sitting across from me right now. The first thing my mom said when we talked about attainable and affordable housing, she's like, okay, well, as a single mother, where would I be able to buy my jug of milk? Which currently would be, the closest place would be one of the gas stations, right? So I am not averse to the idea of a small commercial development, and if this is going to be a neighborhood that has families, maybe there's a daycare as part of this, there are options. But yeah, I am open to the concept of there being a small commercial space there.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with that. It's a brand new neighborhood, and it's they're going to need a place to buy their quart of milk for sure. So yeah, I'm totally supportive of that. Councillor Kennington?
Council just approved the development across the street at 2102, and that contains a commercial hub. So, and then we have the medical center, and we're starting to build like kind of a gateway into town that's got a little commercial node and some housing. People can walk to work. I think it's just part of that village concept, just taken to the next level, where people could potentially live, work without getting in their car at all. So I do support the integration generally of commercial into residential neighborhoods.
Great, thank you. Councillor Mafty?
I'd agree wholeheartely. Where do you get your jug of milk? That's something I've faced myself, and I think when you consider adding 250 odd doors, that's a neighborhood, and good city planning is, pretty clear that you need to support that, and it needs to grow organically. And I think that the alternative is to have all of those units now relying on commercial space in the core of town. I think it would be a mistake not to consider a commercial component to this development.
I agree, for sure. Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I agree with everything. I think you said everything. I mean, we were talking about redfish earlier, and I do miss the Murrays being an option. So if you're in a hurry and you could pop in there, especially when you know it's going to be busy somewhere else. So, yeah, I think it sounds great, and it services that area, and those folks in a pinch will have a place to go. And I agree. It's another little pocket of town with a little village feel to it, and they've got the medical center right across the road. It makes sense.
Great. Thanks, everybody, for your comments. The next section is to do with vacation rentals. Mr. Gregg.
Through the mayor. As highlighted in the report, a number of recent applications for housing developments have requested having a component of vacation rentals as part of changing the pro forma and offsetting costs. It has an impact on land values and sales values, and including the application on this property in 2022 initially requested having the short-term vacation rentals, which was not supported by council, and it was ultimately taken out of their proposal. So that's not currently part of the zoning. So this is really sort of prompting that discussion of is there concern with that, because that has been something that has been a pattern in probably the last 3 major housing rezonings, I think, that have been discussed by council.
And so in this application, they are proposing that the vacation rentals be restricted to the 10 waterfront market homes.
And 29 of the units that are on the near the waterfront homes, there's multifamily units up there. There's also 29 vacation rentals shown on the initial plans.
On the proposed Lot 5, right. Okay, so the question is, do council members have any initial concerns over a component of short-term vacation rentals in the current proposal at 221 Monado Road? Councillor Kennington?
The only concern I have is the public perception. And so when ERA first came to us, they opened up the spreadsheets and started running through the numbers with us. And what we saw with the sliding scales is, how can we pay for this affordable housing? And it was very calculated. The profit margins are fixed. And it's like, how do we get this price down to what's deemed affordable in your community? And this is how we pay for it. And it really is a sliding scale of, okay, just enough to pay for that. And I think that's the model going forward. I would, there's other developments that come to town that aren't offering us anything as far as affordable housing, and they're still asking for STRs. And so this sets a precedent that if you do want limited STRs, you're going to have to provide something to the community. And I think it, as a measured approach and not letting it just run rampant through our community and using it as a tool to get what we need, which is affordable housing, I think it's supportable, but I will listen to what everybody else has to say on it.
Thank you. Councillor Mafty?
I definitely agree that there's been a trend. Some developers approach the community and basically they say, well, we want STRs. What can we do to sort of get you to accept that? And this has been the opposite, which is encouraging. I think I'm the most vocal critic of STRs. If I had my druthers, we would see no STRs. So I don't support them, but I also understand the math here. And as reluctant as I am to support an STR, if that's the way forward, then I would definitely consider that it's the best of a bad situation. If that was the model going forward, I would probably still try to be the squeaky wheel and see, okay, how far can we slide the scale to minimize new STRs? But as it's been presented, I have difficulty criticizing it in the blanket way that I have with other proposals that have been a cash grab. This is how, you know, the current proposal seeks to afford to build the affordable housing. I'd like to explore it. I have some concerns, but for me, it's not a deal breaker at this point.
Thank you. Councillor Anderson?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with what you said. Well, both you guys. If the STR is it's few compared to the total number of units that are in there. So I don't think. But again, I saw the pro forma that, you know, when we looked at the numbers, and it was just enough to get it over. And I know that the developer doesn't. It wasn't his choice to do it. He's like, well, you don't want holiday rentals, and you know, well, let's see what we can do to make this happen. So to get people in these other units that are going to be affordable, how do we make that happen? And all of a sudden, you start to see like how this could work out, and you're like, okay, that makes sense to do that. But the second part of that I thought was interesting was, as much as like I know that there's you know, STRs are definitely in the hearts and minds of people in town, as you know, with a negative connotation because of the housing situation that we're in. If, for example, there was, say, a nurse practitioner that we wanted to get for the medical center, and they're coming from Vancouver where they're getting paid a certain amount, we might not be able to pay them that much when they come here. So for them to afford, it's almost a lateral move in housing costs, like from there to here. It's not that much different. So to top that person up that might not be able to afford that place, by giving them that STR, that might be enough to break even on that. So that extra revenue that they can get, to move forward with that plan, I think that helps. And we know people in town that are in that situation. And again, I know like STRs aren't in, you know, and at the top of everyone's list, but I think in this case it makes sense.
Yeah, that was a good example, actually, of the nurse practitioner and giving them the option to have a short-term rental to top up what we can't afford to pay them. Yeah. Councillor Hoare?
I agree with points previously made. That my only hesitation on this is that all 10 waterfront homes would be part of those short-term rentals. So I assume like whole house rentals. And I'm a little gun shy on that one, because then do we have 10 vacant unless they're rented spaces there?
I don't think they would be whole house rentals. They would just have a unit that would be a short-term rental.
Yeah, it's just not apparent from the way it's written, and I'm not sure. So that would be my concern, is if we're talking about whole house rentals versus unit rentals. And it might be that they're unit rentals. But yeah, just that's the thing that concerns me on that front. So aside from what else everybody else has said, and I do understand that this is one of those times where they have come to us, you know, and this is kind of they're providing an awful lot of affordable and attainable housing, and there is a little bit of a pill to swallow with it. So while I may not be a short-term rental fan, I do understand that it does allow this project to get off the ground and continue to be affordable. So
great, thank you. And I think we could have a say in not allowing whole house rentals. Is that correct, Mr. Gregg?
Absolutely, because the zoning is up to what council adopts. Also, the whole house rental is a bit problematic in British Columbia, where the owner occupancy and your principal residence is a requirement generally. So I think that's kind of the context of this. And but obviously, the comments are being heard, but details to follow with the actual application that is submitted.
Great, thank you. The last item on the list is the temporary use permit. Mr. Gregg?
Yes, through the mayor. We don't have a lot of detail on this, but there is a request of whether it be an option or openness to considering a temporary use permit for manufacturing, really essentially to be using part of the site in the initial phases around the manufacturing of the housing units, is my understanding of the concept. So we're sort of prompting that.
So the question is, subject to meeting environmental and servicing requirements and subject to public comment, do council members have any initial concerns with the concept of a temporary manufacturing facility on the eastern portion of the site? And I think this is just one option that they are looking at. They are looking at other pieces of property, from what I know. But when push comes to shove, is this something that that council is okay with? We'll start with Councillor Anderson.
Ooh. Yeah, yeah. Again, I know people that are desperate for a place, and when I tell them about, that at the open house there were numbers, and I don't think I've ever seen that before, like that. They're definitely not at that affordable point. So, there were people that finally kind of have a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think there's. There's going to be a price to pay to get this done quickly, and I don't think it's a big price to pay in my mind. I don't know if this is going to step on anyone's toes to have a TUP in this particular case, but I don't see it as being a negative, and it's relatively secluded in there. I don't know if that's going to bother anyone, but again, like, whatever gets this up and running as quickly as possible. There's people desperate for housing, and that's the way I look at that.
Great, thank you.
At the end of the day, any housing development is going to need to be built. So what we're talking about, a manufacturing facility, is actually probably going to produce less noise and less waste than a typical construction of buildings such as this. So it would actually be a benefit to the community to have them do it. So as long as it does meet the environmental permitting and monitoring, whatever we need to do to make sure it's not negatively affecting the environment, I don't have a problem with it.
That's a good point. Thank you. Councillor Mafty?
Anytime I'm emphatically for or against something, I qualify it by saying I'm one guy and I want to hear what the community has to say. This to me is a no-brainer. One of the things that struck me in our early meetings with ARIF is they have a real sort of like vertically integrated manufacturing capability and capacity, which is one of the things that allows them to produce the volume at the cost that makes this feasible. And I agree. I think it's like I said, to me, this is a no-brainer. It's like, this is the secret sauce that sort of lets this particular developer offer the product that they do, which is substantially different from a lot of the other construction approaches that we've seen. So if this is what it takes, it's like, yeah, for sure. And it goes without saying, subject to meeting environmental and servicing requirements. I think anyone who appreciated how the units are constructed and assembled would sort of say, oh yeah, okay, this makes a lot of sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Councillor Hoare?
I concur with what's been previously stated. As long as they're meeting those environmental requirements, it's going to make this work. So I am not averse.
Great, thank you.
I just want to add one point, and this is just my understanding based on the material that we've been presented, is that this would also significantly, if I understand it correctly, speed up the whole process. So not only is this going to make it easier, but it's also going to make it a lot quicker than a traditional sort of build it one piece at a time type of approach. So that's something else to consider.
Yeah, I think their manufacturing plant is Campbell River, maybe, and this would move that to here in order to create the housing more quickly. Yeah. All right, those are all the questions. So next steps, Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, thank you for the discussion. I mean, the next steps really, the report lays it out that essentially the applicants are working on getting together a complete application. This would include OCP amendment, rezoning amendment bylaw, phase development agreement, housing agreement bylaws, environmental development permit. And so some of the pieces that we need to see for that, the environmental and archaeological assessments being completed, the engineering on tsunami Those are the pieces that we're sort of looking for and sort of bringing the pieces together, but I think this discussion helps. The other piece is servicing. We didn't talk about that. That really is kind of a separate parallel thing that's happening, and there's a report that our engineers are working on. I believe going to be coming in October, and something like up in the coming weeks here. That's talking also about like more specifically looking at servicing and servicing this end of town. Not just this site, but really other sewer infrastructure in particular that would be impacted by this. So those are all sort of pieces that are floating along, but I think this is very helpful. So thank you. If there are any questions about the process or timing, I mean, essentially this is due diligence of, is this project shaping up in the right direction? Is this the right site? What fits? That's kind of the conversation. I think the applicants have heard a lot here tonight.
Great. So our comments were helpful then.
I think so.
Excellent.
Nodding.
Great. It was not a waste of time. That's awesome. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gregg.
I just want to say that I really appreciate the process that we're going through right now. It feels collaborative and it feels informed throughout. So kudos to everybody.
Yes, and I know staff realize how important this project is to council, and they are working their hardest to work with the applicant to get things moving quickly. So, and thanks for being here. Are there any notices of motion? We have some correspondence items. We have correspondence related to the Sunset Point Boardwalk. And I think there's a little bit of history to this that that maybe the planning department can offer.
Is this a report or is this just correspondence? It's turning into something already.
So, and now that, it's somewhat visible on the screen there. So through the mayor, the request and the question about the public access to Sunset Point and the overlook that's there, it's a little more visible on the back wall for those in the audience here. Essentially, a couple of things. I believe Public Works has looked at, one request was the state of it. It was built by the developer 20 years ago, and the boardwalk is in state of disrepair, and they've looked at it and have a plan for replacing the current boardwalk with a gravel trail, which will be lower maintenance and still get you out there and maintain, fix up the viewing platform that's there. So that was sort of the one. And then the other request or question was around why public access out here. And I just wanted to highlight, we just pulled the old survey plan. So there is a requirement in the Land Title Act that basically subdivisions that front onto a body of water in the ocean provide public access by road right-of-way every 200 meters, or in rural areas every 400 meters, unless it's exempted. And at the time, there was an exemption that was granted, and the province has to approve that on the subdivision that sort of created this area. But part of that was, as we look back, presumably around allowing some public access, and I think that led to the statutory right-of-way that was registered that the district holds for public walkway or public access to get out to that viewpoint. So that I just wanted to point out, like at the time that this parcel, sort of the larger parcel, was being subdivided, I'm just highlighting, this is the Big Beach, this is the end of Matterson Drive, and Marine Drive was created extending down to Matterson. There's a couple of existing pathways that go down near the Primera, and then just a little bit further on. Those are road dedications for pathways. But over the parcel here that then became the strata, it's common property and a right-of-way was granted. So that was, I think, the rationale around exempting that. Otherwise, the sort of default would be public road dedication, including those strips that go down to the ocean. And it's just sort of visible. There's one over on Marine Drive, further in towards getting into towards Little Beach, where you have one of these little road ends where it is potential for a future viewpoint or access. There's a number of those around the community. And that's sort of the history of this, is that it's a requirement to be considered. So it doesn't appear to be arbitrary that it was actually a requirement, and this was kind of a relaxation of that requirement to simply have a right-of-way for the public. So it's shown in our official community plan as being part of the trail network that allows people to get out to the viewpoint there, and that as a statutory right-of-way, the district is responsible for, certainly if someone were to trip on the boardwalk or something like that, it's, we maintain it, it's our liability. So as I said, Public Works is taking a look at it. So I'll see if there's any questions, but we saw this question come up, and in a short bit, just to sort of help everyone understand the context of this and where it came from, we did a little bit of digging to see what might have been the origin of it.
Thank you for that information. So there is a plan to replace the boardwalk with a gravel path.
I believe so. Perhaps Mr. Lawrence can speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. Public Works and Parks had a look at the boardwalk and the viewpoint. There's a little bit of work that needs to be done on the viewpoint itself, or the platform. There is a plan over the winter and into the spring to replace the approach from that gravel boardwalk to a compact gravel pathway, which will be easier to maintain in the future. So they have it. They took a look back in early September, and are moving forward with plans to effect repairs to that area and make it more accessible.
Thank you. And with regard to the complaints about damaging the neighborhood assets, I guess I'd call it, and littering and things like that. So that would be a bylaw enforcement issue, and
Possibly bylaw. So littering, garbage disposal, absolutely, right? If people are disposing garbage illegally, if we can catch them, we'll give them a ticket, but it's awfully difficult. When we're talking about trespass and theft or any other things, that's an RCMP matter.
okay. So the residents could be directed to contact either of those entities based on what they're seeing. And
Absolutely.
yeah. So what would the spray paint on the natural rockscapes, what would that fall under?
It's a good question. Probably bylaw and parks, right? Bylaw enforcement is, if we were able to find somebody that is vandalizing public space, then we can take enforcement action, or RCMP can get involved if it's egregious. If it's a public area, our parks and public works staff usually do mitigation work, so they'll go down and remove graffiti and that from various objects and locations. If it's on private land, then it would be the homeowners or the property owner's responsibility to manage their own property. So we don't do any work on private lands, nor do we manage them. We don't control trespass or illegal access to vacant lots. That's outside of our purview.
Great, thank you. Would it be possible for someone to reply to these two letters?
Absolutely.
Great.
Mayor, just wanted to note that I believe one of the writers has their hand raised this time on Zoom. Question period is upcoming. Just wanted to note that the hand is raised.
Okay, we'll get to that person during question period. Thank you. The next set of correspondence relates to stop signs at Bay Street and Peninsula Road. And I believe, Mr. Lawrence, there is a staff report coming to us in the near future about traffic in general throughout town.
Yeah, our engineering department is looking at that, so they just need a little bit more time to develop that report and do it fulsomely so that they can report back on all the items identified by council as needing additional information before making a decision on the Bay Street parking or Bay Street stop signs.
That's the part and parcel of that report then.
That is correct, yes.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Can I just chime in? I feel like since both of these items were addressed to me on behalf of council, I just wanted to reply and thank Miss Edwards for a fulsome package of information. I found it relevant, compelling, germane. Particularly, she cited this Bismarck 2022 study, which I found quite interesting. I thought it was food for thought. My intent was to open up a debate. I hope my zeal wasn't perceived as an excuse for arrogance, and I think that some of the material that she sent us, particularly that report, was certainly worth considering.
Thank you. Information items. I think there's just...
I just wanted to note, sorry, I just wanted to note the CBT letter, which was...
Oh, right. That was a late item. 10.3, Clayoquot Biosphere Trust letter dated September 24th. And that is... They are inviting us to an event which is open to the public on Monday, September 30th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Ucluelet Secondary School. So that's why this is a late item, just to get it on our agenda so that we're aware of that. And they're also inviting us to an event at the Tin Whiz on Thursday, October 24th from 8:30 to 4 p.m., which is the Fall Regional Forum, which also facilitated by the CBT. So 2 dates to keep in mind for the CBT to attend. And now we'll move into information items, which is Fire and Emergency Services 2024 Q1 to Q2 report. Welcome, Chief Geddes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, this report is just to provide a high-level overview of fire department activities for the first half of the year. A more complete report will be presented for year-end. So first of all, we start with a breakdown of call volume, which is very similar to last year, marginally below for the first half of the year by 1 call, so not a significant difference. And there's a breakdown of the types of calls that we did attend. Happy to answer any questions if you require more detail on any of that, but the numbers are all very similar to past trends. So, pardon the pun, but nothing too alarming there on my end. So.
Oh God. It's hugely evident by looking at the numbers of calls that the medical and motor vehicle accident calls far outweigh anything to do with fire.
Absolutely, and that's very common for most departments in this day and age.
Right.
Through the mayor, a lot of that's attributable to increased enforcement of building and fire codes throughout the years. We're seeing less and less chimney fires, and by us I mean the fire service in general, not even specifically here. But as there were, years ago, we would. It's not uncommon to attend, a chimney fire every other day, and when people were just building their own chimneys and a lot of old uninspected tin chimneys and things like that. So. A lot of that has to do with just a change of codes and best practices throughout the area. For us, yes, absolutely, our bread and butter are medical and motor vehicle incidents. So included in the overall count of calls, 19 responses were in contracted areas. So that's areas such as the ACRD, with whom we have an agreement for South Long Beach. And Ucluelet, Itatsu, and Makoa as well, and as well as the National Park. Now that being said, we don't provide the same level of service in any of the contracted areas that we do in town. So, for instance, we don't respond to medical calls in any of the contracted areas at the moment. Emergency management, there were no EOC activations, and there was one emergency support services activation in the reporting period, and that was to house a family after a structure fire. So called on my ASS team, and what happens is they place families and provide them some basic necessities for up to 72 hours, and that includes housing. Page 2, there's just some trends of call volume by month for the last 3 years. So you can see 2024 is the green line. So it's we're trending, to be a little bit busier overall throughout the year. Typically July, August, September are the busiest months of the year, and we'll the current numbers are showing that as well. But again, we're numbers are manageable. We're seeing a significant increase, but it's not unmanageable. As far as training, that's just a real high level of some of the training highlights for the first half of the year. So 5 recruit firefighters began the NFPA 1001 certification program in February. They're moving right along, that group. 1 firefighter completed NFPA 1021 Fire Officer Level 1. 3 attended live fire certification at the Comox Fire Training Center. 3 more attended live fire 2 certification at Comox. 2 completed fire instructor level 1 certification. And that's a big help to me, because up until that point I was the only one that had that certification. So it's nice to be able to spread the load of work amongst some of my senior officers. 3 firefighters completed hazardous materials operations certification training, and that took place in Arrington. 2 completed first responder recertification. Every 3 years, EMA licensing requires the first responder licenses to be to recertify. And then 4 firefighters attended survival training and rescue techniques at again at Comox Fire Training Center. And that's a great day of self-rescue for firefighters. One of the biggest things we need to be aware of is when we get put in these hazardous situations, how do we get ourselves out of them? So that's a great course. Fire prevention saw probably our biggest significant increase of where we were in years past, and that's specifically due to the hiring of a full-time fire prevention officer and in my deputy chief. So we completed 84 fire safety inspections in the period. In 2023, by myself, I was only able to complete 32, so the numbers are justifying the position. Still working with Deputy Chief McCurry, mentoring him into that position. Still relatively new in the fire inspection world, so but he's coming along fine. He's in a fire code course as we speak. One of the projects that I gave to Deputy Chief McCurry was a goal of inspecting all of the commercial food providers in town before the busy season starts. So commercial kitchens are widely considered the highest risk classifications for fires. So I thought it'd be nice if we could target all those in town, excluding the mobile food vendors. We haven't got all of them yet. So for a lot of the restaurants in town, that was the first time they'd ever been inspected. So we got a lot of questions asked, of course. So it was important we went in with a soft hand, explain why we're here, and that we're here to work with them to get them up to code. During the overall project, it was very well received by the restaurants. I do have to say, extremely high level of compliance was achieved. 2 restaurants I had to issue orders for. 1 is still outstanding, so we're working with that owner to achieve compliance.
So does that mean they are still operating, or they can't operate until they are compliant?
Sorry, through the mayor. The fire code allows a lot of interpretation, and so we're really trying to work. The business is still operating. We've given them some guidance and some recommendations, sort of progressively up into reissuing their business license in the new year. So, but we've been very patient with the business and working with them, and we'll continue to work with them in the quiet season. The next fire prevention initiative will be to complete inspections of all the district's mobile food vendors, as well as all hotels, motels, and resorts. Fire department continues to work closely with the planning department as a vital component of the business license application process. So as council is probably aware, a lot of our short-term rentals change hands quite frequently, and that's a great opportunity for us the fire prevention department to get involved and inspect them. So we haven't been able to do targeted inspections yet. We just haven't had the means to hit all of the short-term rentals because there are so many. But that is sort of the next goal, is ensuring consistency throughout all of the, whether you're staying at a hotel or a Airbnb, that you're getting the same message as far as what to do during an emergency. And then the last part of that is, along with fire safety inspections, we're legislated to produce pre-fire plans for any complex structure in town, so such as multi-story commercial complexes, et cetera. Again, I was able to start that, but in order for that program to really thrive, again, that sort of falls under fire prevention. So a lot of times we're doing creating pre-fire plans along with the same time while we're doing fire inspections. And it works out well. We're using a new software program where the two parts of the program talk to each other. So if we do get a response to, say, the fish plant, for instance, automatically it maps us to there, which isn't difficult. But in a bigger city, mapping is very important. It tells us where the nearest hydrant is, what the fire flows are for hydrants. But it also will show when the last fire inspection was, anything outstanding. So as we're going there, we can, we can realize, see quite easily if there's any noted hazards that haven't been addressed. So up to date, we've completed 13 pre-fire plans in the first half of the year, and we're continuing to work on that as well as we build out the fire prevention program. 2024 is, as we know, the fire department's 75th anniversary. So we're planning a big celebration on October 6th. During that is the actual start of Fire Prevention Week in British Columbia, and that aligns with our open house. So I'd welcome council and everybody in the public to come and attend our open house from 10 till 2 on October 6th. We've got a bunch of activities planned, such as station and apparatus tours. Something new we're going to introduce this year is a bit of a simple obstacle course for the public, or even for council to try, where we'll offer to dress people in clean firefighting gear, and you can put on the full suit and see what it's like to not go up on a roof, but maybe climb a ladder 3 rungs, or drag our training dummy around, or things like that. So it'd be a good opportunity to see what it's like. So some other things that day that'll take place is a fire safety and recruiting information table. We're going to have auto extrication demonstrations. Again, as noted in our call volume, that's something that we take a lot of pride in, is our skill in auto extrication, because every incident is different, depending on the vehicle, depending on the impacts and forces involved. So we do a lot of training, and my team is very proud of their efforts in auto extrication. So as am I. So front and center, we're going to have a car out in front of the fire department, and we'll be doing some demonstrations on that. We'll have Chief McCurry will be doing fire extinguisher demonstrations. That's a big part of what his job as fire prevention officer, when he goes into these restaurants and businesses, is ensuring not only they have fire extinguisher in place, but do they know how to use it? And we always ask that question when we go for a fire inspection. And if the answer is no, then we provide the training. And we've done that with numerous businesses in town, just even a quick 10-minute lesson on where the extinguishers are and what they can do and what they can't do, and when you need to call us. So. And then of course it wouldn't be a fire department party without a barbecue, so we'll be having hamburgers and hot dogs, and then the Madam Mayor has graciously offered or accept my offer to have her cut the cake at 1 o'clock. We'll have a birthday cake prepared by the co-op in the day of festivities.
I have to ask, did you get Spout Ball organized?
Still working on that, and that's why we haven't. I'm leaving that one to the Firefighters Association because I have enough on my plate. So we've got a team that's working on that, and that's why we haven't advertised it yet. But hypothetically, there may be Spout Ball at 2 p.m. Just can't confirm that yet. So
At the Whale Festival, we tried to have it this past March as part of the Whale Festival, because it hasn't been done for a few years, and our insurance company refused to insure us if we held that. I think they just didn't understand what it was.
Yeah, it caught us off guard a little bit as well.
Yeah.
But, anyways, yeah, the crew has looked into it. One of our new recruits actually has an insurance background, which is great. So, the team's all over that. So they're just number one, we're making sure we have enough resources at the hall that day to do all of this stuff. But then if there's still interest and we have resources, then absolutely they're looking at bringing back football.
That would be awesome.
Yeah. And I'd gladly answer any questions council has.
Yeah, any questions for the chief? Councillor Anderson?
This might not be the right time to bring this up, but it was when we went to UBCM. It's not a question, but just we went to UBCM and we talked about the fire hall, and it wasn't. It was a bit disappointing, I found, with emergency services, the Ministry of Emergency Services, because they weren't making any promises, and they really weren't able to give us any good news at all on that front and reapply kind of thing, and which doesn't mean that we're gonna quit on that one by any means, and we're going to keep digging on that one. And I've got a meeting with Minister, is it Farnworth for public safety. So I think we're going to keep going on that one. But I was kind of just digging around at EBCM to find out, and I know that like a volunteer fire department isn't like your father's volunteer fire department anymore. It's not like you go and have a couple beers and you know if they have a fire extinguisher. The training is incredibly intense. And retention and recruiting is going to be more and more of a problem. So it's kicking the tires on that one at UBCM with some of these remote municipalities. And everyone's having a hard time. And I'm wondering, what do you think of, like right now there isn't much like things that you can retain people on that potentially don't have other coverage. Would there be, when I spoke to someone at UBCM, it sounded like to get coverage and basically basic medical benefits for your volunteers it's not very expensive. Do you have anything that you've seen on that?
Through the mayor, yeah, thanks, Councillor Anderson. Yeah, that is one of the programs I'm working on. If you ask any fire chief anywhere, what's the number one issue? And it's recruitment and retention. It's like, how do we continue to attract these great people? And once we get them, we got to keep them though without burning them out and giving them a reason to come back, other than a sense of giving back to the community. Especially when we're not super busy. We're not. I got into it 25 years ago, because I wanted to drive the fire trucks and go rushing into fires, and I did that for 20 years in Alberni Valley. We don't see as many fires out here, obviously, as that. So recruitment and retention is key, and looking at alternative means. And so I actually have come up with a plan to provide benefits, medical, dental, and memorial benefits for, and at budget time we'll bring that up, and fairly inexpensively in the scheme of things. But it's not 100% coverage, because it was tough, because typically there are lots of different programs, insurance companies out there that provide coverage for fire departments such as that. But it's not as easy because they're not full-time employees. So typically you get benefits when you're full-time in any employer. So, but through the company that provides our current member family assistant plan, it's called VFIS. They have a good benefits program through the district benefits broker. I contacted her, and she did some research and got some quotes, and we met several times and came up with a pretty good alternative that I've already pitched to my current crew. At first I wasn't really sure how it was going to go over, because it's about 50% coverage. So for dental, medical, 50% coverage has some really good coverage in other areas. One of my members who has no benefits said, Chief, that's 50% more than what we had. So it was nice to see that they were, or hear that they're really grateful and appreciative of that. That being said, not all of our members need full benefits package. So out of the 18 volunteers, only 6 of them, because I ran some numbers, of course, to see what it's going to cost and who actually needs them. About 6 of them need family coverage for themselves, and they have a spouse or children as well, which would be covered. And that's at about a cost of off the top of my head, about $113 a month. So overall, and again, at budget time, we'll bring this out, the exact numbers, but it wasn't a big hit in the scheme of things, and I think the benefits far outweigh the drawbacks of that. If we can attract people, because maybe somebody's working in the hospitality industry, or whatever industry out here, and doesn't have benefits, and they're humming and hawing and think about joining the fire department, perhaps that's the icing on the cake that helps attract them and keep them. So.
Right. Yeah. No, I like that. I like that idea, and I think we're pretty lucky to have you guys 100%. The other thing, like just asking people at the UBCM and in this space, was a paid on call model as well, which seemed to be, both of these were not much to add to a tax situation. I thought it was quite low. I don't know if you come back with this idea. I don't know if you'd be able to give us a little bit about that as well, but like budget season's coming, and we can kind of talk about that as well.
Through the mayor, absolutely. I appreciate that as well. Mr. Cadman's not aware of this, but I've been crunching some numbers on that as well, just as we get into budget time. So absolutely, that's something I would like to present to council, because now some of my members, especially with the duty crew process that we have, are arranging work schedules, and that's where it's sort of crossing the line where it's we need them. The community needs them. I need them as a chief. We all need them, to know that we have a certain level of response capabilities, but when they're having to rearrange their work lives for something that doesn't pay the bills, it's tough to keep them for forever. So yeah, absolutely looking at that, and I will have some numbers for budget time. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions for the chief? Okay, thank you for your report, and look forward to seeing you on Sunday, October 6th from 10 till 2.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, we're now moving into council committee reports. Councillor Anderson?
Oh boy. All right, there was a lot because we didn't have a meeting. Well, it's been almost a month, right, since we've had a meeting. So there's a bunch of things that I'll go through this quick because I know we've all got a lot to say. So September 4th, I talked to Michelle Babchuk, the MLA for the North Island and Campbell River, talking about kelp, and it's near and dear to my heart, the whole kelp story. So I was talking to her in regards to the North Island College initiative that's basically paying for micro-credentials for people involved in the kelp industry, which ties into our economic development aspect of bringing kelp into town, and maybe in some ways offsetting some of the pain we're feeling from the diminished fisheries. September 11th, we had the Arif Open House. That was a great turnout for that. It was pretty interesting. I think we had some people that were dying to get their hands on a unit before it left, and at the exact same time we had the Yuki Days volunteer appreciation night, which was great. So Candace and Abby outdid themselves with snacks and all that, so that was awesome. Am I stepping on your toes? Were you going to say these things? Am I going? You can tell me to stop whenever you want. The next day was economic development. We talked with the whole economic development team. So that was a good one. We talked about the SWOT, which is the I never remember what this stands for. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats is the last one. The threat. Okay, threats always sounds ominous.
Losing him, Sean.
I know. Everyone's leaving. Oh, this happened. Story of my life. It's like wrap it up. I'll look up and no one will be here. Lights will be up. And after that was the YFN council to council meeting, which was I thought was great. Unfortunately, they couldn't get too many from their side. They were kind of all over. So, but it was still nonetheless it was a great meeting with the Ucluelet Thought. And we have very similar issues with infrastructure, so we're kind of on the same page. That was the topic, the theme of that meeting was infrastructure, and it went well. On the Saturday was the Soapbox Derby, and I just wanted to give a shout out. It's a great event. I'm biased because I've got a 7-year-old who just loves it, but just to see Mako, Noel, and Lara Kemps out there, their kids aren't even in it anymore, and they're out there hustling and picking up these cars and doing stuff for the kids, starting early and staying late, and the Rotary Club as well. It's just such a great day. And then the next day, obviously, we went to UBCM, and that was the week-long meeting. And I won't go over too much on that, but we had the one thing that's interesting is when you do this, and the ministers that are there's an election coming up, so it's kind of a weird year for that because there's no promises anyone's going to be there. But we did meet with two non-ministerial ones, which is Island Health and North Island College. North Island College is about seaweed and economic development, and the other one. was Island Health and talking about the new medical clinic and staffing that, and that was great. I think we made inroads on both of those and talking about the potential of having rural visits by specialists, which kind of ties into like seniors home care and just having a rotation of people. And Tofino's kind of honing that model right now, so hopefully we can adopt that and we can have people less traveling that people will have to go see specialists. Yeah, I'll probably leave it there and let you guys talk about the other things.
What was your favorite part of UBCM?
My favorite part? Oh, boy. Well, this year, was it just me, or did everyone say they loved UCluelet? And they've been here. Like, every minister was like, I can't wait to go back. And, I was here, and it was like, I found like and then I offered.
No soup for you.
Yeah. If you come back, it better be in a brand new fire truck, or else just don't come.
Exactly, yeah. But everyone seemed to love UCluelet. We were getting a lot of love there. So that was probably my favorite part is how much all these people that the housing minister said, he's like, I just got back from UCluelet. I'm going to go back again in a couple months. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, we didn't have to even go to this. You could just see you out in UCluelet.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoare.
All right. On September 14th, I attended the board meeting for the Vancouver Island Regional Library Board, and we worked our way through the budget. It is just a modest increase over last year. It's a couple of percentage. I think it's 2%. Don't quote me on that. I don't have the papers right in front of me. But yeah, and we had a lot of discussions about some things that you all would have seen at UBCM, which is the trying to bring forward an increase in funding to public libraries, because their funding has been frozen for much too long. And the price of delivering services is doing nothing but increase, as we all know. So that was the 14th. And then, of course, UBCM the following week. My favorite thing was probably, really two parts. One was George Strombolopoulos talking about the art of listening, because I think that it is a very underrated skill. And it is beyond crucial to, not listen to reply, but to actually just listen to people. And my little quote from him was, "You never know what you're saying means to the person who's listening to it." So, because everybody hears it through their own lens. And then we also attended a very good session on mental health. And given the way my last week went, that was a very appropriate session for me. And then my other thing I want to highlight, because I've attended for the last few years, what is in the CBT letter, the UCluelet Secondary Schools presentations, Youth on Reconciliation. They are always amazing. They are always worth the time. And they usually have to kick me out with the big boot, because I like to spend the entire time reading all of the presentations from the kids. So I just want to encourage anybody who is available to go and see what they have this year, because it will be heartrending and uplifting all at the same time. And that's all I got.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kennington.
Hey, I was there too. So it's all been covered off pretty much. So the only thing that really stood out to me, the educational component going to, tools to implement new housing legislation. And you can read all you want, but then you get these little snippets out of some of these presentations that are really great. And one of those things was, and this is probably common knowledge, but I have a short memory, DCCs were expanded to fund fire, police, waste, and recycling. So, different avenues for those DCCs. I know we need to use most of them for infrastructure at this point, but it is nice to know that they're expanding the scope of those DCCs. The other thing was explaining inclusionary zoning. So I've heard that a lot, didn't really ever dive into what it was, but essentially affordable units or cash in lieu to provide units off-site. So that's something that we've never really discussed before is, we're talking to developers and we're trying to provide housing on-site on all these developments. And sometimes it's not going to make sense from a land cost thing. So potentially with starting up a housing authority, we could possibly look at funding some of those with some of the higher end developments on the waterfront, say. And, it may not make sense to do affordable housing there, but it doesn't mean they should be off the hook for providing it. So potentially we can start funding our housing authority through inclusionary zoning and density bonusing, same thing. Just because we give density bonusing doesn't mean we have to build the affordable housing on that site. We can do it elsewhere where it makes more sense. We get more bang for the buck. The other thing I found was interesting, and I didn't know this existed, was the Housing Needs Report Calculator by UBC. So it was really fun to sort of type it in and go through all these crazy stats. And it's just data driven, right? So you're just looking at it and you see how many units we need. And it was a bit eye-watering to see that, the target that this calculator set for us was 794 units in 20 years, 254 units in the next 5 years. The great thing about the ARIF proposal is it's about 254 units in the next 5 years. So that's great. The thing I enjoyed most about UBCM is coming out of my shell, and part of that came from the Economic Development Committee, where we're talking about where we want to take the community and the kind of industry we want to bring to town, and part of that conversation was North Island College. So having the opportunity to go and meet with North Island College and sort of corner them every chance we had was kind of exciting and a sort of an expansion moment. So that's what I enjoyed most about it.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Mafty.
Soapbox Derby, great time, loved it. I wasn't there for all of it, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll jump right to the end temporally, and I attended some of the Heritage Festival events. The highlight was the Bullhead Fishing Derby at the Japanese dock there. Huge thank you to Dave Hurwitz and the Prass crew, and it was awesome, that kind of like late summer vibe where it was great to see a lot of community members out having fun and just taking joy in these little things that are certainly not little to organize and host. So that was really nice. And then of course UBCM. I thought it was at times you just like beating your head against the wall, and other times there were moments of your eyes are opened. And I would agree that a highlight for sure, in terms of like a positive highlight, was the meeting with North Island College. A lot of these minister meetings, it's sort of like we have absolutely nothing to offer you, but would you like a photo with us? And it's like, okay. But it was really encouraging to meet with people who are thinking outside the box, and I thought it was hilarious. Like they're like, oh, let's meet in the food court, and I was like, oh my god, this is like amateur hour. And then we had, it was like over an hour, and I felt like that was the most productive meeting we had in terms of like where we're going. So
Till the fire alarm went off.
no, even that though, it was like I feel like a lot got accomplished there, and it all feels very vague and nebulous, but like things are starting to loom out of the darkness, and I really hope that in a couple of years, some of the sort of pie in the sky stuff that we were chatting about is going to come to pass, and it seems like we're not the only ones that want to see it. And then in a sort of memorable, like couldn't look away, like I always thought, man, it would have been cool to see like the Hindenburg explode, and that's what that housing panel that on the first day was sort of like, where all those experts were kind of like, oh yeah, well, if you think it's bad now, just wait 5-10 years, it's only going to get worse. So that certainly put a lot of the rest of it into context, and it was just great. I enjoyed it more than last year, that's for sure. I feel like I got more out of it, and that was lovely.
Great, thank you. My meetings, September 4th was a West Coast Committee meeting, and the good news is that the landfill now has Class A compost available for us. So they charge us to take our what do you call it, organics away, and now you can go and actually pay to have some compost that's made from it, and it's actually Class A.
It's a real racket.
And it's available if you bring your own bucket, or they will sell you a bucket. Let's see, how does it
Maybe we should look into that.
From the buckets they got from our recycling bin, I assume.
Probably, yes. the rate is $50 per yard, $5 for a 20-liter bucket, and $20 for a sort and grow bucket. So just for all you gardeners out there, just letting you know about that. September 11th, I was at the Barclay Community Forest meeting. They're planning on holding an open house. I believe it's going to be here at the community center. October 22nd was a date they were looking at. I don't know if it's been booked yet, but we're all going to be at the VAIA conference, or some of us will be anyway, that week. And then that afternoon was an ACRD board meeting, and then that evening was the Monado Bay ARIF open house, which was really well attended, and a lot of positive comments coming out of that. Oh, at the West Coast Committee meeting, I thought this was interesting. The park shared their visitor statistics. So between April 1st and July 31st of this year, so for those 4 months, they received 476,000 visits. And that is an 8.8% increase as compared to April to July of 2023 because of the Cameron Lake wildfire and Highway 4 road closure that year. Severely impacted visitation in June and partially July and August. It's a 1.2% increase as compared to April to July of 2022. And it's an 11.3% increase as compared to April to July of 2021 because there were still strict travel restrictions. And a 116% increase as compared to April to July of 2020 because the park was closed to visitors. So what they've looked back now to compare it to the same period in 2019, which is kind of our last normal year to compare it to, it's a 4.5% increase over 2019 visitation. I just thought the statistics were interesting. September 12th, we had our Zoom meeting with the Ucluelet Thought Leadership Team, and they had some really good news to share with some grant money that they had just gotten notice to build some housing with. They're going to have a total of 57 new homes, 10 of which are modular, in the next 2 years. So that's pretty exciting for them. Their goal is to bring some of their people back to the territory to live, so they need the housing for that. And then UBCM, of course, the same week as all of us were there. I thought George Stroumboulopoulos was really a great speaker, and the art of listening. I also agreed the mental health session was really, really good. And what else did I enjoy? Yeah, the minister meetings were they were interesting, but not particularly fruitful because it's an election coming up very shortly. But I did enjoy the North Island College discussion and the fact that we had to move 3 times and ended up at a little concrete picnic table out in the food court. That was pretty cool. That's it for me. So we're now moving on to question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions and comment on matters within Council's jurisdiction. Representations about bylaws that Council is prohibited from holding a public hearing on, or bylaws that were subject to a public hearing, are not permitted at this time. Are there any audience members that wish to address Council? Okay, please go to the microphone. Just your name and address, please.
Mayor and Council, and staff, it's a pleasure to be here. I just wanted to add a little piece of clarity, and I really appreciated the discussions on what we've submitted, but you'll find if you actually have a look at the EREF website, we are actually not a developer. I know that just about everybody that actually puts in a development application would actually be seen as being a developer, but we are really a housing provider. And so that's really the basis that we approach things from. We are working with you to provide housing. we've had to put on our development hat because we've got to jump over a whole heap of hurdles like a normal developer does. And we've had to actually develop portions of the site to actually make the housing providing happen. And so I just wanted to add that little piece of clarity. It's really nothing very important. But just for the record, I really have appreciated to date working with staff and council, and we're really enthusiastic about trying to create a good result on 221 Monado and believe that we really can. It was very hard for me not to answer some of the questions as they were going around, but I'm sure we'll do that in writing. But we take on board the conversation that was had and take on board some of the concerns that council and staff have. And it's all about trying to work together to get the best result. And ideally, we'd all love to live in a perfect world, but we know that that doesn't exist. And so sometimes we've got to bend and twist to try and make things happen. But we'll do that to the best of our ability. So there endeth the question.
Thank you, and thanks for attending this afternoon.
Who is this guy and where does he live? That's what
Yeah.
He's a developer. No,
who's this
Sorry.
developer
Sorry,
guy?
not a developer.
Anyone else in the audience that would like to address council? Yes.
Okay, sorry. Mike Baird. I live at Lot 3 on Sunset Point. So I just wanted to talk about the path. Sorry, I missed the discussion earlier.
Can you talk into the mic, please?
Damn it, sorry. That path, we are a property adjacent to the path. So I missed your discussion. I just wanted to make sure that the district, it has a certain responsibility to uphold since it is their property. And as we are the neighbor to your piece of property, some thought needs to get put into it, I think. I don't think anybody in this room is aware of the traffic in that area. We've spoken to some district staff who happen to be on site, so I kind of have a feel for what, may or may not happen and what some of the reasoning is. But at the end of the day, if you get rid of the boardwalk, all of a sudden there is no barrier between that and our property, which is going to force me to build a fence, and I don't feel it's a cost that I should incur. And then if the neighbor on the other side builds a fence, it's not going to be a very welcoming gravel path for anybody. Nobody's going to want to go there. So, it could become a longer discussion, obviously, but I mean, that's how I feel about it. Just simply turning into gravel is not a reasonable outcome, I don't think. It doesn't solve any of the problems that we're facing. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Are there any members of the public attending by Zoom or telephone that wish to address council?
If anyone on Zoom wishes to address council, please raise your hand. By telephone, *9. I see none at this time.
So we lost the one that was on there earlier.
We did.
Okay. And have we received any emails to Ucluelet, communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
There are none at this time.
Okay, great. I move that the September 24th, 2024 regular council meeting be closed to the public pursuant to the following sections of the community charter. 90(1)(e), the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements, if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality, and 90(2)(b), the consideration of information received and held in confidence relating to negotiations between the municipality and a provincial government, or the federal government, or both, or between a provincial government or the federal government, or both, and a third party. I move that the September 24th, 2024 regular council meeting be adjourned at 6:49. Oh. Oh, right.
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor Mafty seconds. All in favor? None opposed. That carries. Thank you, Mr. Rotenberg.
Can we get a?
Now I will move that the September 24th.
Now we're gonna come back. Closed session, and we'll have to make sure that the public's not here so you can do your closed session.
Can we get a motion for a bio break, please?
Yes. Okay. So we're adjourning the regular meeting at 6:50. We're not.
So we come back out of closed session.
Ah, okay. All right.
Hey, guys, I just want to apologize that I can't attend the closed session tonight, so.
No, we saw your text.